From slime-filled monsters to toys that literally oozed goo, the 1980s and 1990s gave us some of the strangest and grossest toys ever created. The 1980s were the perfect time for something as strange as Mad Balls to become a hit. These weren't normal playground balls, they were disgusting monster heads covered in horrible details. Each one looked like it had been through some kind of nightmare, with bulging eyes, exposed brains, slime, rotten teeth, and strange mutations. Characters like Slobulus, with his giant drooling mouth and exposed eyeball, and Foulshot, a basketball creature with worms crawling from its head, became instantly recognisable. The whole idea was simple. Take something children loved and make it as revolting as possible. Mad Balls proved that kids didn't always want perfect heroes. Sometimes they wanted the weirdest, ugliest creature they could find. Few toys captured the 1980s gross-out craze better than Garbage Pail Kids. Originally released as trading cards and stickers, they were a disgusting parody of the much sweeter Cabbage Patch Kids. Instead of cute children, these characters had bizarre problems, strange mutations, and very unpleasant names. You had characters like Potty Scotty, who lived up to his name, and Itchy Richie, covered in a scratching nightmare. Parents often complained that the cards were too disgusting, but that only made children want them more. Garbage Pail Kids became a cultural phenomenon because they took everything adults considered gross and turned it into something funny. The Dr. Dreadful Drink Lab turned children into mad scientists, at least for a little while. Instead of making normal drinks, kids could mix strange powders and liquids together to create bizarre-looking creations. The results included bubbling mixtures with names like Monster Wart and Putrid Potions. Although the finished drinks were usually sweet, the whole point was to make them look disgusting. The toy captured the 1990s love of fake slime, monsters, and horror-inspired fun. It let children experiment, make a mess, and pretend they were creating something from a creepy laboratory. Mash'ems from Coleco were the perfect toy for children who loved things that were strange, squishy, and just a little bit disgusting. These small, rubbery figures were designed to be squeezed, stretched, and squashed into ridiculous shapes before slowly returning to normal. Instead of being collectible figures that just sat on a shelf, Mash'ems were all about the feeling of touching them. Their soft, stretchy bodies made them strangely satisfying to play with, and many featured characters inspired by monsters, cartoons, and pop culture. The appeal was simple. They were weird, they were fun, and they were impossible to stop squeezing. Mash'ems captured the 1990s obsession with slime, goo, and toys that were more about texture than imagination. The 1980s was a decade when toy companies discovered that kids loved one thing more than anything else: watching things crash, break, and go horribly wrong. That's where skateboard smack-ups came in. Instead of being about perfect tricks and smooth riding, these toys were all about ridiculous accidents. The idea was to launch figures on skateboards and create wild crashes, sending characters flying through the air in spectacular wipeouts. The fun came from the chaos. The bigger the crash, the better. It perfectly matched the skateboarding craze of the era, when children were fascinated by ramps, tricks, and the rebellious image of skate culture. Skateboard smack-ups turned every failed stunt into entertainment and gave kids a way to recreate their own miniature skateboarding disasters. The real Ghostbusters toys brought the spooky world of the cartoon into children's hands, but some figures were especially creepy. The Haunted Humans line featured characters that looked ordinary at first until their hidden monster features were revealed. Figures like Granny Gross had terrifying details, including moving jaws, strange eyes, and creepy surprises. They combined the fun of action figures with the gross-out style that was everywhere during the 1980s. These toys proved that even something familiar could become frightening with a few monster upgrades. Creepy crawlers gave children the chance to become miniature monster creators. The set included a special oven where kids could pour a strange material called goop into metal molds to create their own plastic insects, worms, and creepy creatures. It was like an easy bake oven for kids who preferred spiders and monsters instead of cakes. The smell of the heated material became part of the experience, and children loved making their own collection of horrible creations. The toy perfectly matched the 1980s obsession with monsters, slime, and anything that looked like it belonged in a horror film. Gooey Louie might be one of the strangest board games ever created. The idea was simple but disgusting. Players took turns pulling boogers from a giant plastic nose. The problem was that some boogers were connected to a trap. Pull the wrong one, and Louie's eyes would pop out while his brain shot upward in a ridiculous explosion. It was the kind of toy that made children laugh and adults wonder why it existed. But that was exactly the appeal of 1990s gross-out toys. The more disgusting and silly something was, the more entertaining it became. The Mad Scientist Monster Lab allowed children to pretend they were creating terrifying experiments. The set included a laboratory-style tank, where kids could mix strange powders and bubbling liquids to create a monster-style science experiment. The idea was inspired by classic horror movies, with children acting like mad scientists bringing strange creations to life. It was messy, weird, and perfectly suited to the 1980s obsession with monsters and creepy inventions. Stinkor was one of the most unusual action figures ever released. Part of the Masters of the Universe toy line, Stinkor was a mutant villain who didn't just look disgusting, he actually smelled disgusting too. The toy was made with a special plastic formula that gave him a powerful, skunk-like odour. While most action figures were designed to be heroic and cool, Stinkor became famous because he was unpleasant. Kids loved having a villain who could literally clear a room. The 1980s and 1990s were a time when toy companies discovered something important. Children didn't just want toys that looked cool, they wanted toys that made their friends say, "That is disgusting!" And that is exactly why these strange, slimy, and unforgettable toys are still remembered today.